Well, once again, I'm with my good friend Collin. We haven't had him on for a while, and it's a small dispute we had. I was saying that silicone was really the only way to go, and he was saying water-based, and we found out there's a blend. So uh, we're friends again, and everything's working out. So
I'm glad to make these kind of compromises with you, John.
all right, so uh, we're going to be talking about Conquest's 3 laws of politics. And what I can do is I'm going to throw up, just because, yeah, too much pizza. I'm going to throw up the laws real quick. We'll just read through them briefly, and then we'll kind of delve into what's going on with them. So these are the 3 laws as we understand them. Everyone is conservative about what he knows best, and there's some alternate versions that say everyone is reactionary about what he knows best. The second law is any organization not explicitly right-wing sooner or later becomes left-wing. And the third law, the simplest way to explain the behavior of any bureaucratic organization is to assume that it's controlled by a cabal of its enemies. So, pretty neutral stuff there. So
Yeah.
All right. See, I am learning this. I could not do that on the fly before. I mean,
Very good.
Yeah, it's a tiny little card, but
I'm glad you're relinquishing your boomer tendencies, John.
Hey. I am 1 year outside the boomer generation and very proud of it. I went through my entire life being called a slacker. I am part of Gen X. Don't forget it.
I just think it's more of a state of mind here.
Well,
we're talking about.
Yeah, well, the thing is I hadn't done anything with video. The last time I did video work was
when it killed a radio star.
About that time frame. No, I was working in a studio where we were doing a news broadcast for my high school, and we were on videotape.
Oh.
And we had big switching boards with big levers and things, and you mix the screens together, and post editing was feeding three different videotapes through one mixer into another thing. It was beastly. So it was so far behind. So, like I said, I'll pick this stuff up. It'll come. Okay. So that back to that Robert Conquest thing. So
yes.
Do you want to? So where did you come across this?
I think the very first time I had heard of it was actually from a podcast. It was just part of it. I believe it was in a podcast from the Distributist, his gentle introduction to Mulva. I'm not 100% sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of forgot about it because there were other interesting things to listen to. And that was where I very first heard it. And the interesting thing about it, when he talks about the first law, which I think is one that people would largely agree with, despite what your political bent is. The idea that everyone is conservative about what they know best or reactionary. But he said, if you change just one word, it makes it make a hell of a lot more sense. Is that everybody is conservative about what they love.
Okay.
Because I think we just see it everywhere. No matter it, there are people that they love communism. They love Marx. They don't want that to change. Their idea of Marxist communism. That's the way. You shouldn't change it. That's the way we should still go. We see right now with the radical feminist movement, this big rift between the feminists that are really into the biology of being female and those that say no, people that are transgender also should be part of the feminist movement. Things like that. So the TERFs...
We're probably going to get a little tag at the bottom of our YouTube video now.
Well, why not?
Well, we need a definition from an expert. So go ahead.
But yeah, so like no matter what idea that you have, even if it's very radical, you're still going to be like, no, I want this thing to kind of be how I am,
Okay.
and how it always has been.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't think most people would disagree with that.
Okay. So yeah. So I'm glad you rephrased it that way because that was the one law I was having some trouble with because I was going to throw the example at you, but now it makes sense the way you said it. So I was going to say is okay. Ron Paul and the Federal Reserve. How on earth would you say Ron Paul is conservative or reactionary about the Federal Reserve? But it's not the Federal Reserve he loves. He loves hard money.
Hmm.
And so that puts it into perfect context. So if he is conservative about hard money, he can be absolutely radical about the Federal Reserve.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I like that clarification. Do you know where you ran across that? Because I didn't see that in anything I was looking at.
Like I said, it was actually a point made by the distributors. Like if you
Okay.
just change with
So
what they know best with what they love, it all kind of clicks
okay,
together.
so he probably thought it through and was running into the same issue. It's like, well, that doesn't always bear true because it means people claim to be in love with things that they're absolutely willing to be or not in love with, but the conservative about things that they're totally radical about what they want the outcome to be.
Yeah.
Um, did you see anything out there? I saw several people very angrily decrying the idea that Robert Conquest that these were actually his rules.
I did see some of that. That people are like saying, "Well, did he really actually say this?" And people, well, the reactionary part
Mm-hmm.
was one of the big things. Is like he said reactionary, he didn't say conservative. Um, in in I don't know exactly who it was. It's just attributed to him. This
Right.
might be kind of a Mark Twain kind of deal, where
Yeah.
where he might not have said it, but this was in line with his philosophy and how he thought. He was a big anti-commie.
Mm-hmm.
He started out as a commie, but then did
Oh,
he?
that part I didn't get into in his bio. So, do you know anything about his communist years?
This when he was a very young man, and then when the Second World War broke out, the communists were blasting it as imperialistic, but he was a Brit and he was really happy about being a Brit. And he said, screw you. And he dropped the Communist Party at that.
Okay. Okay, and that would make sense with another one of the stories I heard because following World War II, he ended up with kind of working adjunct to the government in what was essentially an anti-communist propaganda unit.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the stories they talked about was one of his office assistants ended up approaching George Orwell for help. So you saw that. So helping out with
Yeah.
how to identify communist or more specifically Soviet sympathizers. And apparently Orwell coughed up a list and characteristics. So I find it interesting because they both kind of came from the same area where they were true believers at one point. Now Orwell, didn't completely decamp, but obviously Conquest did. So very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. He wrote, I believe, three major books about uh, the Soviet Union, specifically Stalin, like the terrors of Stalin and his abuses and what have you. Side plug, Michael Malice's White Pill is excellent.
Okay.
Uh, as far as that,
Yeah, it's on my
nothing.
it's definitely on my list.
Uh, but yeah, so it was actually from his work in like with Orwell and whatnot that he ended up compiling this that created his later historical books about the Soviet Union.
Okay.
So
Okay, so any organization not explicitly right-wing sooner or later becomes left-wing.
Okay.
So that's interesting because there seem to be a lot of examples of it.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of the various foundations that were set up, and they were set up by people who were, at the very least, very strong capitalists. Probably you would call them, at least, if not outright American nationalists, you would say that they were nationalist adjacent, where they would look at the United States as a positive place. And almost all these foundations are off doing something completely different at this point.
Mhm.
Very, very much into the deep leftist causes, uh, espousing things that their founders would have not only found abhorrent, but couldn't even conceive as possible.
Yeah. One of the examples, I think actually Conquest gave this example, was Amnesty International. Was one that didn't start out as a particularly left wing type of environment. Uh, this and the third law, but especially this particular one, it's it's interesting the framing that I've actually been seeing on the right, well, especially the distant right, on this. Because of the way they kind of frame the viewpoint of right wing and left wing.
Hmm.
Framing right wing to be orderly and hierarchical, and the left wing being, for lack of a better phrase, cultural entropy.
Hmm.
And so the, they really like actually this concept of Conquest second law, because they go, yes, of course. If it's this is idea of like the G.K. Chesterton's fence post, wherein if you have a fence post that is black and you want it to be white, you have to paint it. But then if you just sit there and say, okay, it's white, I guess it'll be white forever, that will not be so.
Hmm.
You have to continually paint it white. You have to keep the order. If you do not continually keep the order, entropy will take over, and then you'll end up with a really crummy looking fence post. And just like that, any other organization, you have to constantly, saying, "Up, yep, that Constitution worked, right?" So that'll never be subverted. We'll just have that document, and everything will be fine. No, you would have to constantly maintain those ideas in that order, or it's going to erode. It's going to, and this is a natural state for human beings. Is that if you don't constantly enforce the hierarchy and enforce the order, then entropy will take over, and that's what this whole idea is of it sliding into a left wing viewpoint.
So I know I wasn't deep into what was going on at the time, but I think we saw similar things happen with the Libertarian Party prior to the Mises Caucus moving in and essentially launching a counter-revolution, where because I'm out in the boonies here, where it was just really impossible to play around with the politics. So I just kind of got to the point where I was watching it on the sidelines, and I watched the crew that came in that essentially went crazy woke. But initially they seemed really cool. It's like, oh, okay, wow, they're energetic, they're bright, telegenic people, they're snarky, it's they're kind of cute and funny. And then all of a sudden it's like, little by little, it's like, okay, I'm starting to disagree with what I'm hearing. I don't know what to make of it, to the point where it's like, okay, I was starting to wonder if I was like drifting, because you tend to drift towards the information you feed yourself. So if so I was thinking, okay, did I like pick up too much conservative feed for my information to where I've become very conservative and like and
No,
finally
you just said the first law.
yeah and
This is exactly first law.
yeah and so the funny part was is I was just listening to their the LP's um the counter statement to the State of the Union address. And McArdle was on there, and she was doing her spiel, and I was listening, and then she'd start coming up to certain topics, and I'd start kind of tensing up because I was used to what the previous crew had done, and then she'd say, "It's like, okay, yeah, we're on the same page again. Oh, yay!" And she wasn't soft pedaling anything. It was the same, you know, out there, scare the crap out of the rest of the public kind of stuff you'd expect out of the Libertarian Party, and it's like, okay, they're back. So, but that just struck me interesting because for a while there, I was really starting to wonder. It's like, okay, are my views changing that much that I'm out of sync with stuff that I would have been perfectly believing, 20 years ago? And then, of course, we do drift from time to time, depending on what's going on, because no one stays exactly the same. But yeah, it just struck me interesting.